Hello and welcome. So this is the first Middlesex FA Youth Council in conversation. My name's Daniel and I'm the chair of the Youth Council this year, and I'm delighted to be joined by Sarah Nickless today. So for those of you who don't know who Sarah is, she's the former chair of the National Youth Council and now works for the Association of Colleges in the role of National Women's Development Officer. I'd just like to say thank you to Sarah for obviously giving up the time to speak to us today, and to go through a journey that Sarah's had through football and the amazing opportunities it has given her. So Sarah, whereabouts did your journey in football start then?
For me, it began in primary school. I think as a lot of us had at the time, have those opportunities to play in random schools competitions where you just need to scramble together a team to go and take part and represent the school, and that's what I got to do. And I remember the first time I got to play for our school. We had the form given us to take home for our parents to sign so we could play the following week, and I got my mum to sign it there and then and hand it straight back in because I wanted to make sure I got to play. I didn't want to be missing out on an opportunity. I remember our head teacher, who was like the team manager at the time, was like, "Oh no, you definitely play, Sarah, don't worry, like you're our captain." And I remember a competition we played in where I was just everywhere. I was the striker, then I was defending, and I was the midfield. Like it's almost like the only person that knew how to play or had that energy. And I usually tell that story as that's how football started for me, which it is and it isn't. But also, I started playing football when my parents broke up. It was my kind of escape to get away from real life, in inverted commas, of whatever was going on. And I played till I was 16 with that same mentality. It got me away from when I was stressed about stuff at school or when I was being bullied or different things. I'd play football to get away from the world. I never really thought about it in any other way other than I train Thursdays, play Saturdays, or whatever the alternation was of what we were doing. I just loved the game. I loved to play. I loved the feeling I had. I loved being a part of a team. Never got out of grassroots. I was never that good, but there was definitely something about the sport that captured me. And I didn't ever know you could do anything else other than play. And at the time, that's all I was really interested in. It wasn't until I was sort of 16, just left school, a couple of weeks into my college course, I was told to stop playing. I had a knee injury. What you can't tell on this conversation is I'm 6'1". Grew quite quickly, and that creates problems in joints and different things. Also played a lot of sport, so a culmination of a lot of things put a lot of stress on my knees and had to stop. It wasn't until that moment I realised that you can do more than just play. There are other opportunities to coach, to set up competitions and projects and programs. And I was coaching in the lightest sense. I kept going to our training sessions thinking I'll be back playing soon. And when I'm back playing, I can stop worrying about the coaching bit because I'll just play again. But as we'll probably understand as this conversation unfolds, I didn't really play again for about 5 years. Not because I didn't want to. Had a knee operation, but also just fell in love with everything other than playing. The feeling I had from coaching and watching other people get enjoyment from playing or developing and getting better, or putting together programs where I could see other people develop, started to be a little bit more exciting for me. And if you'd told Sarah Nickless at 11 years old playing football with the boys and at primary school that's what would happen and I'd stay in the game, then I'd probably have laughed a little bit and never thought this sort of journey would have unfolded for me, really.
Yeah, so obviously a similar background, came through playing football and then kind of wasn't enjoying playing football and thought, how can I stay involved without playing? Obviously I picked up the refereeing whistle, and then somehow through county office I ended up in the youth council. Without knowing people, I don't think I would have known to get into youth council. So I think it's good to see that people can see that there's different ways of getting into sport, and it's not just the playing, the coaching and the officiating. So obviously you said you joined the National Youth Council. How did that come about?
Yeah, so really, I said really strange, but it's probably not. When I was at college and I'd stopped playing, there was a guy at our college that got me involved in lots and lots of volunteering opportunities and anything local that I could do. I was at any event. Our county FA saw me doing stuff and wanted me to be involved as much as possible. And it was in 2012, which makes me feel a little bit old for some of this. now. There was something called the FA Football Futures Camp, which was a 5-day programme of workshops, training, a residential event for people all around the country who would go to that and learn about different aspects of football and different roles that there were, such as like coaching, refereeing, football development, disability football, futsal. And I got to go representing Shropshire. In 2012, that was the first year of the FA National Youth Council in creation. So it used to be like a student management group who ran the camp. Each year it'd be different people, and then they're moving to something else. So the FA evolved that programme and that group of people to become what was then the FA's National Game Youth Council, representing a voice for young people, ensuring that young people were heard and had a lasting legacy for being involved. And they were the first people that I saw young people leading other young people. So they ran the camp that I went to. And really, for me, I just wanted to be a part of that team and a part of the group who could create an environment that made me feel the way I did. I wanted to do that for other people and think about how do I bring people with us on this journey? How do I make sure they feel like they belong and that they've got a place in football is for them? It's not just a place where you play. So that was my sort of spark to go, okay, I don't really know what a youth council is, but I know they run this event and I want to run this event because it's changed my life. I actually wasn't successful on my first application to represent the FA National Youth Council, but also it's probably one of the best rejections I've ever had. And I think that sometimes, if we can get into that mindset, it really helps. So that rejection for me was a bit of a wake-up call of, well, I need to do more. I need to really understand what it is and why do I want to be part of this group. It's not just about one event, it's about a much bigger picture. So following that no, I just got involved in every opportunity I could that I thought would get me closer to a successful application next time around. And part of that was setting up a county FA Youth Council. We didn't have one at the county where I was at the time when I was at university. So I just took on as much as I could, as long as I felt it was relevant. I think sometimes we can say yes to too many things. And the next time I applied to represent the group in 2014 was successful. At the time, it's just a written application, lots of questions. I remember it being a really long application. Then I got to represent the group, and I feel very fortunate that progressed from a regional officer my first season in 2014 to then, as you mentioned in the intro, became chair of the group for 2 seasons. I would say I bent every rule to stay involved. I think I was in the group for 5.5 seasons, which probably is maybe too long in terms of ensuring there's a turnover and the right people involved, but I just wanted to stay involved as much as I could, and I wasn't prepared to let go of something when I knew I was making a difference and I was learning and developing myself so much at the same time.
So that kind of leads us on. You said you were chair for 2 years. Was it always your plan once you're part of the group that you wanted to lead the group, or did you just fall into that role?
No, I didn't want to lead the group, quite simply. It wasn't in the plan until like pretty much a couple of months before it happened, where I was like, okay, this is a real possibility for me. If I want to stay involved, this is the only way I can. There was a huge part of me that felt I really embodied our culture and what we were about and what we believed in, and I really wanted to ensure that was never lost. And the only way I could do that was to stay involved. At the time, the chairperson role evolved quite a lot when I became chair. So the seat was then given for the youth council to be represented on the FA Council in the FA's governance structure, a decision-making sort of role, and with voting rights to make decisions on the game. So it wasn't how it was previous seasons of just leading the team and being represented on one committee. There was a much wider role that I had to really decide if that was what I wanted to do. Could I lead our team of young people, and could I represent all young people within this national role in a structure where no young person's ever really been? And I'm sure there's a well-known stereotype around what FA Council looks like. Everyone was much older than I was. Most of them were male. And I remember first walking into that room thinking, gosh, I'm not sure I belong here. And there are multiple jokes about the fact I was female, the fact I was young, that I didn't really know what was going on. And I had to really prove myself in that arena, not only to myself, but to all these other people that weren't sure why a young person should be in the room. But I'm so glad I became chair. It changed my outlook on so many things. really proud of the way we evolved youth leadership away from counting hours and roles of coach, referee, administrator to how do we make people better as people, and then if they service the game, great, but they're a human first, and that's what we should be always focusing on. The other thing that I think we really excelled in was really changing the way the FA operated around young people, ensuring that we weren't tokenised, we weren't just a nice thing to do on the side, that people really believed in the power of young people, and what we could do to help and aid and develop programs where if they're going to impact young people, then we need youth in those conversations, not as a second thought. We've got to be that first thought as much as possible.
Yeah, so that leads on to, so youth council, I think people feel like it's just for helping other people, it's not for developing yourself. So would you say youth council for you, about local level and national level, did you say it was more developing yourself, or was it just giving young people a voice, or was it both?
I think it's both, but I think developing yourself is a byproduct of giving young people a voice. I think that's for me really important, is that we don't join youth councils or movement programs that we really believe in for selfish reasons. I really think we do it because for a love of the game and for being able to work on something bigger than ourselves, which for me is what life is all about, is doing things that are going to make a difference, are going to create change. But out of that is a byproduct of developing the people and developing through that. If we want young people to have a voice, they've got to be in positions where they've got to influence, they've got to communicate well, they've got to be able to hold themselves, act professionally, and you only learn that by doing it. So naturally, as a process of putting young people in positions where they are going to be heard, they've got to influence and get their message across. Naturally, they're all develop in the process, which I think is the right way around. Other people might question it and go, okay, I want to be involved because it'll make me a better person, but also I'll have make sure that young people are being heard and developing programs for them. But I think we get more out of it when we see it the other way. What can I give? And then in return, I'll develop because I'm giving so much to make something better.
Yeah, definitely. So what opportunities did you being obviously part of the National Youth Council, so what opportunities arose from being involved in the Youth Council for you?
There were so many, and I think it's only now that I've come away from the programme that I've realised how many there were that I didn't see. I think there was, right from the off, I was working with county FAs and trying to influence them to create a youth council or a youth forum or something of the similar vibe, and get them to realise what is it that they should be taking notice of. So straight away, that's around your opportunity to influence and be around people in roles that perhaps I'd like to one day go and do and understand how that world works. Every year we were delivering the Football Futures Camp, which evolved into the FA Leadership Academy. So now, pre-COVID, a 4-day leadership programme for young people across the country where we just look at them as people and we help them be better. So in their football role, they're a better version of themselves when they deliver that. We also work towards sort of wider projects that unfolded over time, where we had young people represented on the Improvement Advisory Board, Football Development Committee, and to the FA Council, various other committees where we were being heard and seen and shown about. When I was chair, we supported the under-17s Euros that were hosted in the East and West Midlands. I spoke at the launch for the opening draw for that, and then we had young people in hospitality positions for every game, hosting the most prestigious of guests to show that young people can be in the boardrooms, not just the ones outside, showing people to their seats and handing out tickets, really putting them in the right positions. I think I was really fortunate to travel a little bit to various countries and supported Romania and the Football Federation there, along with UEFA, to develop their youth council, which the English FA is really trailblazing in supporting. But like I mentioned, there are so many other opportunities that you possibly don't see. So some of the things I've made a note of around leading a team, managing responsibility and expectations, which I do now in my job, but at that point when I was still learning and developing, to have that in a voluntary role was giving me experiences that I wouldn't necessarily get if I didn't have that position. Learn how to influence on behalf of young people, so not just representing myself, but a whole nation of people that play the game. You know, over 70% of grassroots football is played by under 25s. And at times I felt like I was the only person from that sector that was having a voice and having to work really hard to achieve that. And I think that the last point for me on this one was I always knew that I wouldn't see or feel the impact. It was always about doing things that were going to help the game for people after me, hopefully making things easier, fighting a few battles with a few people that maybe didn't believe in the power of young people or why youth should be involved in different places. And hoping that through my actions we put the game in a better place. And that was always my motivation, was how do we ensure young people are in the right positions, they're being seen, heard, given the opportunity they deserve to be better. And those opportunities look so different to so many different people.
Yeah, as you say, majority of people who play football are from the younger categories of age people. So why are their voices not heard at board level? It makes sense for young people who decisions for people put in a nice way, older people are making is only affecting the younger people. Young people's voices have got to be heard. And I say personally, I've found as well, one of the big things I've learned from being part of a youth council is how transferable the skills are, the skills you pick up. So like the leadership, how to lead a project, how to develop a project, how to run an event, how transferable they are in the real world when you go out to work. So a byproduct of leading stuff is helping yourself in the end of it as well. So our paths first crossed at the UEFA Equal Games conference held at Wembley. So how did it feel to be asked to talk at that conference?
Yeah, you know, it's such a huge honour. I think that came. It was April, towards the end of my time as part of the youth council and within youth leadership as a young person. Slightly too old now to be classed as one of those. So unfortunately, that came to an end. But yeah, really honoured to represent our work. I think that was my first sort of feeling on it was wow, young people are being heard, recognised, the FA believe in us, UEFA now want us to be talking about this on an international platform. I think there was a bit of a difficult realisation for me for how big that stage was, not in the literal sense, but just how many people were going to hear us, or you know what's their message that they're going to take from me, representing so many other people's work. And we talk about it in our world around, you know, standing on the shoulders of giants, so you can see further. I was standing on so many people's shoulders who had invested so much time at grassroots, county, local and national level to really ensure young people are being heard in the right places, banging the drum, arguing again and again and again to get us these kind of opportunities. That to be the person asked to present, like I say, it was a huge honour for me. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't incredibly nervous as well, wanting to get it right. You know, felt the pressure of the people that had got us to that point, and I wanted to do them proud and do justice to the work that we had done. Yeah, my notes say being asked was very different to how it felt giving the talk. There's two very different emotions. I remember not eating that day. I remember being very nervous, just trying to block out everybody. I didn't really speak to anyone the day of that talk. I was just so focused on getting my words out, getting the message right, pressing the button on the clicker appropriately and not messing up, which sounds really daft. But you know, speaking in front of groups of people isn't something that I particularly enjoy. It's something I've had to almost fake it a little bit at times and just get through, make sure I'm speaking clearly and getting the message across. I'd much rather conversations like this one where I can just be at a level with everybody and be calm, be composed, be sensible, not speaking openly and publicly. So it was a big moment for me personally. It was almost a culmination of a lot of years of practice and trying to prepare myself for being able to speak, but also it was a huge moment, I think, for youth leadership and young people in this country to really be seen. I think you may or may not remember I decided to wear my volunteer t-shirt to present in, purely because for me it was so important that young people aren't seen as just volunteers that help make things happen. There's real value in young people being in the front seats and being heard. And the reason I chose to do that wasn't just for that reason, but the day before I spoke, there was a speaker's briefing at the conference, and I walked with one of the other speakers to the briefing, and she thought I was just helping her find her way, and she was almost sort of shooing me away when this meeting started. Oh, just for the speakers. I was like, no, like I'm speaking tomorrow to. And I just think it still shows there's still, even at that point, a long way to go to ensure people realise that you can't make assumptions on someone's age and put them in a category of what they can and can't be capable of. But yeah, it's quite an incredible talk, I think. I'm not sure how much you remember of it. I hope it landed well. I hope it sounded okay. I remember being told off for having too many slides, but I tried to pair across the journey of the FA and myself. So the journey the FA had gone through around involving young people 15, 20 years ago, and the processes they've gone through now to having a youth council representation on the FA council, speaking abroad, being a real trailblazer for youth voice. And I was matching it to my own of how I got involved. Similar to what I've already said of being a player, started coaching, seeing that there was something bigger than me that I could be part of, and wanted to be part of that change, and how those two journeys almost met in the middle somewhere, and at some point they connected. And it was such a relief afterwards, but in the best possible way of I couldn't have done any more. I felt really proud of being able to hold myself together, being able to get my words out, represent young people in the youth council to the best of my ability. I'm not sure I could have done much more. My dad will tell you that I got a quote wrong that I said at the end, but if you don't know the quote, then no one would ever know. But the feedback afterwards was quite incredible. I don't know how you found it, as you say you were there, so hopefully it landed.
I was there, and it came across really well to the fact that UEFA wanted to demonstrate that the English FA had youth council and youth representation on their board, and all the sub boards had some youth representation. So it was like the whole point of the whole conference was to ensure that everyone had an equal voice. And obviously, one thing that people tend to think of is racism, equality for genders and stuff like that. But it was actually nice to see that young people were given a voice and given a main talk on a stage as well in front of a massive audience.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that was something I spoke to a few delegates about on the first day of that conference, that, age is just as much a protected characteristic, as you say, as gender, as race, as, sexual orientation and those other characteristics as well. But we just almost assume that age doesn't matter, that it's not really a problem. The young people just play, running the game, and everything else is for the adults. But actually, if we don't worry about the young people, give them the opportunities to develop through youth council, through programs that you and I have both been a part of, they're never going to be ready or feel comfortable and confident to run the game or go into different roles in the future. We almost forget that we have to look after young people if we want to have a future of this game at all. And I reflect back on that talk quite a lot. I've not watched it back. I've got the recording, but I'd worry that I would ruin the memory I have of how good it felt if I was to watch it and then be frustrated at different moments. So I wouldn't normally do that. I normally want to watch stuff back and reflect straight away. But it's always in my brain of like, who's going to be on that stage in the future? Who are they going to be the people that are going to be speaking and sharing and telling their stories? It's our job to ensure those people are there and ready, and we've got them in our programs, or just supporting them so that when those moments arise in the future, they're not lost and we're not reaching to even older people, because we've got these young people ready who can take the stage and absolutely deserve to be there.
So I think we've kind of touched on this next one already. So why is it important that young people are given a voice?
I think it goes back to the fact that the majority of grassroots football is being decided upon by people who don't play the game anymore, or their experiences are from years ago. So their assumptions, perceptions, opinions, they were true and they were right, just not right now. And we're assuming that the decisions they're making are what young people want, and we can't know that until we ask them a question or ask them how they feel. It'd be like me saying to you that you own 70% of whatever football club you support. I know Arsenal, but you can't make any decisions. You can pay all your money in, you can be the reason that club stays as it is, but you get no say on anything that happens. That'd be an awful investment. Like, why would you want to be a part of an organisation that does that? Or in any way, I'm not sure anyone would ever invest that much and not get anything back in their own way. And I think that's the best kind of picture I can create for this, is young people are investing so much. Without them, grassroots football almost doesn't exist. We don't have that backlog of people that are enjoying the game and playing it. But the reason that we've got 5-a-side up to 11-a-side, the youth review that came in is because young people are being listened to and being asked questions of what do they want, what do they need, what should football look like for them, rather than football's always been this way, that's how it should always stay. The world's evolving all the time. And the most important people that we should be asking are those that are at the end of it. And I don't know anyone that likes to have decisions made about them and not with them. I think that's the biggest worry, is we'll end up pushing people away from our sport because we're not involving them. They don't feel like it's theirs, or that they've got a say on anything that happens, which is quite worrying. I do feel like not just in football, but just society, young people are overlooked and spoken for far too much. But I also think the last 12 months, in a difficult and weird kind of way with COVID, we've been able to see what can really happen when young people are given space to be creative, to be innovative, and most importantly, just be themselves without expectation that they need to be or do anything, or be someone they don't have to be just because society expects them to be something they're not. And we're seeing young people find ways to keep people engaged, staying healthy and happy in a world which doesn't always allow us to be that, and especially right now that the world doesn't quite show us how that could and should look. And like I say, we're just seeing right now what happens when young people are given a chance. It's just a shame that we didn't do that sooner, or for some people they didn't realise the importance of that sooner. There's the piece around the impact of the game in terms of, does it look and feel like what people want it to be as a player, but also does it look and feel like what anyone would want to be a part of in the game. The sport is such a powerful vehicle to allow people to be better, and as we've touched on, the skills that we've gained through being part of youth councils that we use in our everyday life. If we don't recognise the power that sport has as people are playing and help them as people and as leaders, we're almost missing an opportunity to help them be a better person in society. It's almost that much, how do we take the biggest view of the impact sport has and then realise our responsibility as leaders of the game to ensure that we're maximising the opportunity we've got for young people to be seen, heard, developed. And leaders right now, I think if you speak to the current FA Youth Council, they shout about this a lot. We hear too much around, we won't ask young people stuff now, they're the leaders of the future, so we'll worry about it another day, another time, and often forget that young people can lead right now. And the grassroots clubs, the county FAs, and hopefully the FA themselves are really, seeing the impact that can be held when they are asking young people what do they need, giving them a voice, and not just giving them a voice. I think we're very good at doing that. Social media lets everyone have a voice. There's a difference between speaking and being heard, and that's the sort of the balance of, it's great that the county FA is a youth council, but if they're not listening, what's the point? It's great that the club have asked the players how they want to celebrate the end of the season, but if they still ignore it and hand out trophies, there was no point in asking in the first place. I think we need to start and let go a little bit of the restraint that we have, that adults have this little bit of uncertainty of what if they say something that we don't want to hear. Great. They should be able to say it and feel that they can say things that they think are important. It's going to make the game better and make them want to enjoy it more and come back. That's surely the impact that we want to have. But unfortunately, we don't see it quite enough. Not yet. We're getting better at it, Dan, but it's taking time.
So would you have any sort of ideas of how we can get young people's voices heard, and not just kind of the voice heard but not acted on, if that makes sense?
I think we're getting there. I think there's things that are happening. I think it's taken a long time because people have to understand how to engage with young people. I think it's not as simple as just thrusting surveys in front of people. It's around being really purposeful with our intentions. We're involving them because it's going to make our game better, and that's why we're engaging them, rather than it looks good on paper, so we'll engage them and we'll ask them for opinions. I think that's the big thing, is really understanding why we're engaging with young people, and working from that way around. It's almost that golden circle of start with why. It's important to us, so we're going to make sure that's how we act, rather than, like I say, it looks good, which sometimes is the driver. It's the wrong motivation. And I think there's a real honesty about being able to ask people questions and then act on it, and know that it's the right thing to do. And like I mentioned before, there's been plenty of grassroots clubs that have said to me, we don't want to ask them in case they rip up everything we've ever done. And it's that worry of find the right word. It's that worry that it challenges everything that everyone knows. That people don't like the uncertainty and the unknown, which we're all facing right now. And being able to embrace that is a real challenge. But it's also, how do people see past that? So rather than, they might say something I don't like, I won't ask. It's dealing with that uncomfortable nature, or the awkwardness that young people sometimes have, their innocence to want to change the world when, you know, that's not always entirely possible. How do we manage that? But I think, yeah, it goes back to being really genuine with your intentions, knowing exactly why you want to do something, rather than making assumptions or asking without purpose.
I think it's also delivering on the action. So it's not just the listening, it's actually, perhaps we could do it this way because that's what they feel. And then once the kids, the young people understand that actually their voice is being listened to, then more people are encouraged to speak up, and it just has a snowball effect that way.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's definitely, you know, we have all experienced, I'm sure, times where we've been asked our opinion and it's just been ignored, or it was a tokenistic gesture of, oh, they didn't really want my opinion. They just wanted to know, but they didn't want to act on it. And I think there's something that creates ownership, young people especially, when they can see that they're having an impact. Now more than ever, the research is pointing to this generation want to be adding value to the world. They want to be making a difference and living with purpose. If we stop that from happening by tokenizing them, manipulating them, taking their great ideas but never using them, all we're going to do is make young people feel like that's what life feels like. That's what they're going to grow into. And actually, we can change those norms, and the experiences we've had, we can use them to change how we interact with young people in the future, to ensure they're not left behind or felt like they don't belong and don't fit in.
Yeah, definitely. So if we move on, so what has been your drive or inspiration to encourage the change that is starting to see of young people's voices being heard?
Yeah, really good question. And I feel like my drive hasn't really changed for quite a few years. And I've mentioned it already, to me, that life's really about working towards something much bigger than us. And it took me a long time to realize that, you know, I'm not the epicenter of the world. There's a lot going on out there that we can be part of. And I think it goes back to the events that I was talking about in 2012, where I was most definitely inspired by other young people leading young people, and how powerful that was. I think there's a huge amount to be said for the people that I met, and my network now, who believed in me right from the start, saw something that I didn't see for a very long time, because I was constantly, fighting my own self-esteem and not backing myself, which I probably still do now to quite a high level, frustrations and wanting to be better. But there were a lot of people that saw past those insecurities and flaws and knew that I had something that could help this world. And I think that's been my role since that event, is to, okay, well, what's my power, I guess, to see the gold in others and see the best in them. How do I create spaces and opportunities for young people to find themselves and feel like they belong in our sport? And that's because someone allowed me to feel that. And that's how I've almost lived my life for the last 8-9 years, of taking that feeling that I had, that someone could make me feel that important, that special, that I mattered. I just want other people to feel that as well. I want them to know that it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, what your interests are. Football can be a safe space for so many people. It can be that platform that allows us to be better, both individually and collectively. And every time I've kind of been ridiculed or had to stand up for what I believe in and be pushed down, fight many battles, it's only inspired me more, because I know the impact it could have if we get it right. I know that there are young people that will benefit from my actions if I get it right. I might never see that impact. I won't feel it myself. As I say, moved out of these programs, but there are young people coming up behind me that are going to be further forwards because of my actions, that I couldn't see possible 8 or 9 years ago. But it only takes a moment to change how someone thinks and feels and perceives the world. And that's kind of what I've held on to for a long time, is how do I allow that to happen for other people if someone managed to do it for me. which is difficult to word. I think I'm rambling a little bit around this point, which I apologise for. But seeing them feeling that has carried me through some really difficult moments, both personally and professionally, which is difficult, but it goes a long way to have those things that you can fall back on and go, okay, that wasn't a good time, but this is why I'm doing this. This is the bigger picture. This is where we're trying to get to. This is the end goal, which I'm not even sure what the end goal is. It was just ensuring that every opportunity a young person was being heard, that people that didn't believe and understand we could influence and change their minds, and then just allow young people to have opportunities that have never been there before, to hopefully be better versions of themselves. It makes the game better, and sounds a little bit grandiose, but I'm here for it now. It just makes the world better if we do that as soon as possible, and from the earliest age to allow young people to see themselves in roles and opportunities that perhaps weren't there 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, so it's like similar to what I've seen as well. So when I first started Youth Council, we didn't really have much board representation. And then this season, we're being asked to have young youth members on committees and to be representing on the board. So it's just showing that times are changing and people do realise actually young people's voices do need to be heard. And it may not be perfect by the time I finish Youth Council, but we'd be that further closer again to having the ideal world in essence.
What's can I ask you what inspires you to keep chairing the team, and I guess how does it feel to be asked to have that representation this season? That's a huge step for the county, and the fact that it's happened on your watch, hopefully it's something that makes you quite proud to know that you've helped influence that.
Yeah, so it's been one of the big things that I've wanted from the very beginning when I started on the Youth Council. When I became chair last season, I wanted young people's voices heard, not just as a youth council, but at board level, because at the end of the day, board level is where the decisions are made that affect the younger people. So it makes sense, as we've had conversations already, young people's voices need to be heard, and old people may not necessarily go to think how a young person would think. They might feel like actually this is what they want, but without having that young person's mind in that meeting, they're kind of just second guessing constantly. So it makes sense to me that young people's voices need to be heard, and there needs to be some youth representation on these committees, because they're making the decisions at the end of the day that are going to affect the younger people. And for me, it's a massive honour that we are eventually getting to a place where we are having some youth representation.
Now you've got to use it appropriately there, right? It's one thing to have it. It goes back to the point we made earlier around if old adults, older people, I don't know what the right word is there, are asking young people to be heard, acting on it is really important. But equally, it works the other way when young people are in those opportunities and situations and positions where they haven't been before. Making the most of them is equally as important as having it. Like, that's so important as well. Being prepared to make the most, or at least learn through that opportunity. I feel like a number of sort of boards and organisations, although they might think that young people don't have the experience, what they make up for is knowledge of the game right now, and they can learn all the rest of it. They can learn how governance works, which isn't a very exciting world, but you're exactly right, that's where decisions are made. And for too long and for too often, decisions are made by the wrong people, and it's people like young people playing the game that have to deal with the consequences of those decisions rather than being a part of them as they happen, and ensuring they're right for the people that are going to be impacted by them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're making small steps in the right direction, but there's still massive leaps that need to be made in the coming years.
Yeah, I'm sure that, like, if we don't celebrate the small steps, then almost isn't worth having. If we can't recognise those small steps are for some people huge strides. If we look at the people that have made that decision to allow young people to be represented on the board or the committees at the county FA, for what seems to us like the most natural thing in the world to do, for some people that's really like not normal. Like, why would young people be given the opportunity to challenge an adult or an elder? Like, that's not what society was 20-30 years ago. We're completely challenging what the cultural norms are, and for some people that's so difficult to get their head around, to to go, well, when I was that age, I wasn't allowed to challenge, I wasn't allowed to be in these situations. That's something you earn, that's a right with age, rather than that's now just what we do, that's what's expected. And sometimes we maybe forget how difficult change is for people in certain generations of what they expect the world to do and be like. So I think that's really cool. I'm excited for you and your team to have those opportunities to influence at a different level, but most importantly to know that the county FA believe in young people, so much so they're giving you the positions and opportunities they have.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting challenge on the horizon for us. So if we have a think about what sort of skills have you learnt from being part of a youth council, both nationally and local?
So many, and I'm really conscious of not just listing you know, skills and characteristics of, you know, could easily just go into being able to present better, communicate, being a better team member. But there are a few that, you know, I think are just important. I'm really a different person to who I was before being a part of a youth council, before any of these opportunities for youth leadership, whether it's the youth council itself or the opportunities that I've been afforded because of that role that's allowed me to access different things. It's really taught me about the importance of gathering insight before making a move and really listening, not just acting on a gut instinct. How do we, you know, ensure that what we're doing is right for the people that are at the end of it? It's helped me to listen, which is probably sometimes things we might overlook, but the ability to pause, take stock before we act. And when I say listen, I just mean listen to what people need and want and act on it from that perspective, rather than, it's almost going back to that insight piece of making sure what we're doing is appropriate. And I realised a lot about who I am and who I don't want to be, which sometimes I think we miss out on. You know, skills and characteristics which perhaps I don't think are appropriate or I don't want to be carrying around with me, that are detrimental to who I am and my brand. I think there's other pieces that we've both touched on, especially just then around the boards and committees around influencing. How do I get what I want without being a nasty person in the process? How do I influence appropriately so that people want to listen to us and want to hear us? And that, you know, depends on who you're speaking to, whether it's my colleagues on my team or if it's someone at the FA Council, at the FA chairman. That requires different level of communication for all of those, plus more. When we talk about communication, that's not just about those conversations, but then speaking in front of audiences, as we spoke about the conference earlier. Speaking at councils, quite a daunting thing in front of 120 other people that are all older than me and hope and think they know more than I do. And I think all of this combined really has taught me about my own capabilities and perhaps where I thought where my capabilities maybe stopped but actually didn't. It was just my own perception of what I could or couldn't do. Some of the skills I probably say that I pride myself on around being caring, showing empathy and compassion, in a world where we're very quick to just try and get to the KPI, the number, the end of the task, or, you know, the tangible outcome. We almost sometimes forget about the people in the process. And I've tried to make sure that that's been a real key part of who I am, is to care about the people first. And if we do that really well, we'll probably get the outcomes we want in a secondary act. And a large part of that is the importance of being vulnerable, which to some people might, you know, think, oh, that's not something that leaders do. That's not something that we need to be good at. But actually, that's probably the way that I've been able to lead best, is in moments where I put my hands up and say, you know, I don't know how we should do this. This is really difficult. And in moments where I've needed help, to ask for it, which sometimes people are afraid to do because it might be a sign of weakness. But actually, being vulnerable, it shows us those sort of traits of possible negativity, but also it's only when we're in that phase that we can really appreciate joy and happiness and be trusting of others, because we're prepared to give ourselves to something that we could have taken away or taken advantage of. And although it's not a skill, I feel like I've not answered your question too well on this one, Dan, so I apologise that I've almost taken this in a slightly different direction to maybe what you were expecting. For me, my youth leadership journey was one about finding and understanding myself and being really comfortable in my own skin, being challenged constantly about who I am, who I should be, and developing my own leadership philosophy, which I now use in my everyday life and in my work. And it's almost a blueprint for who I am as a person. And under that is skills and qualities, and it's the ability for me to speak and hold conversation and challenge people effectively, to care and do all the things I've just mentioned. And all of that has helped me to really understand the impact we can have when we develop people as people. I'm going to keep going back to that because it's really important to me. And, you know, when we really invest in people as humans, we see them thrive and flourish. And I think that's what's happened to me. And I guess the main skill I've learned is how to be myself. And I'm not sure there's much more credit or, you know, as a compliment I can give to the programme, to youth leadership, youth councils I've been a part of, than to say that's the role it's played in me and finding me in the process.
I think that's a really good thing to come to at the end, the end of our conversation, is the fact that you've not just got all these skills, it's kind of helped develop you as a person and find where you want to take your life forward after being involved in youth leadership. And I suppose that kind of leads into the big question of why would you want to get involved if you were like unsure why you want to join a youth council. I feel like you kind of answered that. It's to develop yourself and see where you could take yourself. At the start of this, I think if you said when 5-6 years ago to yourself you'd be this far after doing youth council, I think you'd have just wouldn't believe me. But obviously your journey's happened now and you can see how far you've come.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point, and appreciate that reflection. There's so much that can be taken from youth leadership, being involved, and sometimes people see the football badge and are put off because they think football is for a certain kind of person or you have to be a good player. But actually, you know, I've mentioned I wouldn't be the person I am without the game, but not because of my ability. I'm certainly not a very good footballer, but the game's given me so much that I never dreamt it would. And I really hope that other people have the persistence and the ability to see past the sport and the opportunity it could provide them if they're prepared to push themselves. I think in my notes, in short, just say yes, because, you know, we can't guarantee anyone's going to have the same journey I've had. Yours and mine are already so different. But the only reason we've been able to meet through this pathway and through the things we've done is because at some point we've gone, I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to take a risk that this will pay off at some point in the future. And on the way, I'll make a difference. And I think that's such a powerful thing to say and do. I think my kind of last thought on that, to quote one of my favourite TED Talks, which I wouldn't advise to always do, but there's a guy called Drew Dudley who's got a TED Talk called Everyday Leadership. It's 6 minutes. And his last kind of line is, you know, no one changes the world because the world is built up of 6 million perceptions. So you don't change the world in its entirety, but every time you change someone's opinion or you help them see the world differently, you've changed the world for them. And there's so much power in that, which we sometimes forget because we're so busy looking at the big that we forget about the small, life-changing, world-changing moments which we make happen all day, every day, which you and I have been able to do for a number of years through the Youth Council sort of process and programmes, and hopefully because of our efforts that will continue to happen for young people well after us, and it becomes part of the game, part of the culture that's being created right now.
Perfect. And but we actually know we did open up questions from a wider audience. We put it out on our social media. So I've got a couple of questions here. So this one's from David, and it's kind of a two-parter, and he's one of our current Youth Council members. And he said, what is the biggest challenge that you have faced in your career so far?
Oh, okay. There's two ways to take that question, and I'm someone who tries to be really honest. The biggest challenge I've faced in my career is myself. So I could tell you about, you know, moments of rejection or where I've doubted myself or where, you know, things haven't gone right. I've dealt with team members that didn't want to be here or challenged us, but actually it's my own perceptions of my own ability, and being able to see myself in a way that other people do. And it's taken me a long time to get there, to be able to go, do you know what? I am quite good at what I do. People believe in me, and I should start believing in myself too. And I think that held me back for a long time. And I mentioned earlier, it probably still does a little bit, in terms of that self-confidence, self-esteem, ability to back myself in different situations. That's always been quite a challenge, because in doing that, I almost take energy away from the goal and what we're trying to work to and put it on myself, which isn't comfortable. And I know that's probably not the answer that that question's asking for. I think it's probably the truth though, and it's one that I'm sure other young people right now will be feeling, that feeling of not being good enough or not knowing if they're the appropriate right person to take on the opportunities they are. And I've had to prove myself wrong again and again and again, because otherwise it just doesn't happen. You end up standing still.
And then the second part to that question is, how have you overcome these challenges?
Oh, I wish I'd known that was coming. I might not have chosen that challenge. How have I overcome them? Firstly, being surrounded by really good people. And I use the term good person a lot, but I mean it in the way of people that just want the best for other people, who aren't there for themselves or to try and find success in someone else, but they just want me to be, my best version of me, or successful, whatever that looks like for me. So firstly, having a lot of people around me who are supportive, who will listen when I'm having doubts and struggles and help me work through my own problems and realize how many problems I create for myself. And I think almost linked to the chunk we talked about in terms of the conference that I spoke at, just having to take responsibility and opportunities where I felt really uncomfortable, maybe didn't want to do them, didn't want to dive in, but knowing if I did, I'd get a reward in the way of development or proving myself wrong. But it's so important to have good people that allow you to deal with the difficult times, but then enjoy the good times with at the same time.
Perfect. So that brings us to the end of the sort of question and answers. And I'd just like to say it's been really great just to sit here and have a conversation and see your journey through football, how it's developed you, and also the reason you want the voice of young people to be heard. And hopefully it inspire people in the county, if they are looking to get involved in football, not just through playing, coaching or officiating, to realise that there are other opportunities out there. And that's probably, I'd say, one of the biggest take-home messages from this is there is always opportunities for leadership for young people, even if you can't see it right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end. The opportunities are absolutely there. Just depends if we're prepared to see them or not.
Well, thank you, Sarah, very much for obviously giving us some time to speak to us. I hope people have enjoyed the conversation we've had and appreciate how open and honest Sarah has been. And I look forward to welcoming people back to our next recording.